Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mom Curious podcast. I'm Daniela Rabbani, and I am joined by Dr. Raquel Martin, who is a prolific speaker, psychologist, educator. She has devoted so much of her life and private practice to empowering the Black community in mental wellness. I have learned so much from you, Dr. Raquel Martin. I'm like such a fangirl. Whether it's like on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, I watched your TED Talk and I'm just like devouring your content. I know that I know that we can all learn from you as a wellness professional, as a mental wellness professional. But I also know that, like, specifically for the people in this community who are Black, who are raising Black children, you offer such insight and that I could never provide. And it is like such a privilege and honor to, pass the mic to you and to let you educate on this really important and soulful topic around raising Black children, around being a Black parent. I am in such awe of all that you do. Really. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I start most of our conversations by asking, who are you today? I mean, we have your bio. We know your credentials. And of course, people, I hope you guys go do a deep dive into Dr. Martin's archives. But on a personal note and maybe professional, because I know that this is such a passion for you,
Mhm.
your professional life. Like, who are you today? I feel like women, we change in every season.
I've been in a season of like being very scattered lately,
Mm.
with all of like the roles and the responsibilities and stuff has been like falling to the wayside. And I would say that's a recurring theme. I would say at least for the last 2 or 3 months. I actually just got
Mm.
my laptop back today. Was in the shop, and because I didn't have my laptop and I didn't have my typical routine of checking emails at different time. In my mind, I was like, oh, I'm not receiving emails. And that was not the case. So even just following up, like, why do I have all of these emails? Oh, because you didn't do your typical routine of checking your laptop at like 9 and 12 and 3. And so you
Mm.
thought that you didn't have emails. So like, and even just being like, well, some stuff you just gonna miss.
Well,
So typically pretty scattered lately.
but you have an 18-month-old. This is what I didn't understand. Like,
Yeah.
I am I'm like really deep. When I tell you I'm really deep diving, I'm really deep diving. Like, I'm like going back all the way. And you have been so steadfast in your output, in your education, in your message. I had no idea you just have like a straight up toddler, like an 18-month
Yeah,
old and a 4-year-old,
and a
like
4 year old.
underfoot. How are
Yeah.
you doing this?
We have a really good, so we have a good support system. My husband is also like, my routine is more so like go, go, go in terms of like being a psychologist. I have my private practice, being a professor. I teach 4 classes, and then I advise 30 students, doing professional
Wow.
speaking. And my husband just steps in. I remember, not even step in, like he's already here, but like when my husband told me recently that he like took the boys, he went to take them grocery shopping or something like that.
Hmm.
And he said some man stopped him and said, wow, babysitting and doing the chores, a lot has changed. And he was like, man, it's 2023. Like, what the heck? These are my kids. Like, what do you mean babysitting? It's just so odd. So, like, I have someone who we're partners. That's just what it is. He can't stand when I call him my partner, but we're partners. I think it's just spouse and I'm just like, it just doesn't really give just nuance to like how much we work together. But he very much has a job where it's his like 9 to 5, and well, it's not 9 to 5, but it's 40, 50 hours a week. So I'm able to kind of go at my pace because he has a normal job where he's not in and out of the state. I typically travel like twice a month for speaking engagements,
Amazing.
in addition to teaching. But the balance is for his job where he has to be there, like he can get some justifications, but he's an accountant. So they have these crazy deadlines. With my job and having coursework, I can have, for example, And next week they're having a field trip on Friday, so I just canceled my whole day to do
Cool.
my son's field trip. But my husband could never do that, so it's kind of like a balance. But his family's here; they also help a lot. But even with that, uh, parenting is like quite the beast. I specialize in like family and traumatic stress. I'm still parenting in a way that is not the way I was parenting. I was parented. So it's still like very much a interesting perspective because there were some weekends where I didn't even see my mom. Like she was with her friends, I was with my grandmom, or I was with my
Mm.
great grandma, or my aunts and
Mm.
stuff like that. And it's still like very different than that. Even with all the support we get, that's why so many people mention like, oh, it takes a village. I was like, yeah, but you can still have a village, and what you need shifts, or your threshold shifts. And you still have to come up with some kind of supplementary thing because my children they're like one of my planets and stuff like that. They're not my world. And I
I
love
love
my
that.
job. And I love helping other people with their children and helping people as adults too. So there's also that. Like, yeah, my children are great, but like everything I do is not for them. My God. Like, there's no way.
Well, I feel like that would be too much pressure on them anyway, right?
It is too much pressure. It's an inappropriate level of pressure. That's when you get into the realm of like enmeshment, and parents start to get a little bit resentful when children start to
Mm.
have their own lives, which is
Mm.
really it's appropriate, right? But I've seen some dynamics where like daughters or sons will start having their own romantic relationships in their own lives, and there's this
Yes.
feeling of resentment from the parents.
Yes.
And there's this whole mindset of like, I sacrificed everything for you. And children are like, I never asked you to do that. And it's appropriate for me to develop my whole life. But when you spend so much time just solely with your children and you never really got a chance to figure out who you are outside of that, it can feel like a betrayal and a
Mm.
shock when they
Mm.
start to have their own lives. So, and your children need to see you do other stuff. They need to see priorities outside of them so they can have appropriate expectations for relationships too. Like they need to hear you say like, oh no, mama doesn't want a hug right now, but I can give you one later. Oh no, mama's not staying home right now. Mama's going to hang out with her friends. It's important to build all relationships. Oh no, mama is not doing this right now. She really likes, I'm going to help some other families with their kids, and then I'm going to be home
Mm.
at 5 and I will tuck you in. So you can
Mm.
understand that there's so many things that are supposed to contribute to you. But when they think they're the end all be all of your life, a lot of times they think they're supposed to be that way with other people. And that is not the case. Like
So it's like,
your partners, I don't care if they have boyfriends, girlfriends, anything. You are not their whole world.
mm-mm,
No.
mm-mm. No, you are not.
You are not. Like, what do you mean? Mm-mm. No.
Yeah, so we gotta like set them up for success in
We
that
have to set
way.
them up for success. We're growing whole humans. If we sometimes I'll hear people be like, sometimes it sounds like you take parenting so seriously. And I was like, I think more people need to take it more serious. And then they would be more reasonable in the decision if they're able to make that decision, whether or not to parent. Because it is one of the most, you're putting out a whole generation of people. It's one of the most serious jobs out there, which can feel overwhelming. You have a phase where you lose your identity. You're going to lose some aspect of your body. You still have to function and figure out a way to support yourself while supporting others. And
Mm.
it sounds like a lot because it is a lot. And there's no reason that you have to do it. Like when people, I'm very much aware that everyone doesn't get to make that choice. But if you are in a position, which unfortunately these days is a privileged position, and you're able to make that choice, take the time to think about whether or not you want to do that. Like it's okay to say that you don't. I have 2 children, and when people say they don't want to have children, I'm like, I am so happy that you're able to make that choice for
I
you.
know.
This is just
I
a choice I
know.
made for me. I think some people feel attacked in that decision, but that actually says more about that person than the
Mhm.
individual who shared that they did not want to have children. And it's just like, it's curious. I'm wondering what made you react that way. What made you feel as though they just punched you in the throat? Because you seem like you're throwing shots right
Well,
now, and I don't understand.
I think it's because the programming in society is that women in particular are uh, really only as good as what we produce in terms of other human beings.
Mhm.
I think we are breaking that societal chain. I think we really are in the midst of that. Even women like you and I who have 2 children of our own saying it out loud that like that doesn't make me any better, any worse, any more, and that has nothing to do with pretty much anything.
It
It's just
doesn't.
how I want I just want to that's how I want to live my life.
Yeah.
But there is still pretty loud voices in in this country, and I'd say in the world where our worth is in our womb. So if we believe that, and someone is saying, well, I call bullshit, I
Yeah.
understand why that person would feel attacked, because if you're like believing like brainwashing essentially.
It
I
is
mean,
brainwashing, right? It's the result of propaganda. I mean, it very much is the aspect of years of, and I think also think it's hard for people to realistically think that they're going to be. It's going to be easy to up in this propaganda. And when people think about propaganda, I asked my students this one time. I asked them this like for each of my courses, and they mentioned like, oh, joining the war posters and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, I want you to think bigger. I want you to think about the times that you see women that look like you in media. I want you to think about the times that when you were growing up, you saw people that look like you or women having a job outside the home, or you only saw men having a job. I want you to think about there's this one book by Ijoma Opara, and she mentioned there was this women's magazine where the whole purpose was to villainize women being single. Like this was a whole magazine, and they were very much intentional on the messaging of this magazine. Is it is important for women to be in the home, and it's dangerous for them to to have their own lives. And it was was it housekeeping, good housekeeping. um it was
wow.
one of those books and one
Yeah.
of those magazines, and it's intentional, right? So it's of course difficult for you to upend all of these years of programming. Like you're probably going to surprise yourself at some of your reactions, and I think that's
Yeah.
okay because it took media and decades of this programming. It's going to take some time to figure out what you want, or even realize that you don't know what you want, and be okay with being scared with that. I think the issue comes when you attack others as a
Yeah.
result of your lack of knowledge. But I think it's normal to just be like, even if you have a child, be like, I don't want any more. Or there are times when I just want to be left alone. These are all pretty normal things. Like children are, just like you mentioned, underfoot all the time. My son earlier, it was one speaking, another one speaking. And I was trying to figure out like one thing. If somebody asked me what 1 + 1 was, I probably would have said 11. And I literally told,
Sounds good to me.
I was like, hey, baby, I just need a second. I can't think when you're talking right now. Like it was just really hard, and it's very loud. And a lot of times, honestly, I see a lot of parents, and I experience this too, of having the juxtaposition of being so overstimulated and then also being bored out of their minds. Like it's like I will be so overstimulated, but if I have to cut another crust off, if I have to, wipe another, but like it's the same routine. Like I'm
If I have to
bored,
listen to the wheels on the bus
and it's
one
just like it's
one more
the
time.
same thing. And people are like, well, it should, at least you're doing the same routine. And I'm like, that's boring. That's
Yeah,
boring.
that's boring. Yeah. It's so true. And I think like, it's unfortunate almost that I need that validation from a psychologist, from a doctor, from a literal doctor to say like, guys, it's boring. What do you
Yeah.
mean? I have a feeling people sit in your office and they say, I don't enjoy, doing Legos with my children, and they
Mhm.
pathologize themselves. And you have to literally say, babe, you're paying me hundreds of dollars an hour to tell you that because you're human.
Oh my gosh. I had a patient who she was like, oh, I want to share something with you, but it's just terrible and it's awful. And I was like, throw it at me, like she was in there for therapy, and she was there for family and child therapy. And she was like, just sometimes I am, and I'm just like leaning in, like, it's got to be murder. And she said, I am really annoyed by my daughter. And I said, oh, well, yeah, but that's because children can be annoying. And she said, what? I was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, did you have something? What? I'm sitting here thinking I'm about to be an accomplice to something. And she, like her face, face, like totally detensified, after like I said, yeah, that's because sometimes kids are annoying. But the fact you would have thought she was about to tell me where she hid a body.
I
Like, she's
mean, I
like,
believe it. I
I am.
believe it.
She's like, I'm sorry. It's just like, I know it's terrible. I just have to share it. It's just awful. I know. Please don't judge me. And I was like, it's literally my job not to judge you. What is it? I thought she was going to tell me where she hid a foot or something. She said her child annoyed her.
We've been fed this propaganda. And I do think, and you and I both work on social media, and I think that it's a really powerful tool. And, when I see that, like, you have like 1 million followers, and I like really thank God for that. I'm like, okay, this is a person who like is educating the masses and is being real. And there are people who are just selling us absolute nonsense
Pure
that
garbage.
it's supposed to be pleasurable all the time, that this is our only worth in the world, that I mean absolute, that we have to look a certain way while doing it, all the while they have care in the background, they
Mhm.
have a whole bunch of privilege, their lineage in and of itself is
Yeah.
not bogged down by trauma, like there's a real push to just feed women garbage
And
that
it's so
makes us.
frustrating because the whole thing is if you have it's amazing. Like some people don't have the village they deserve. So I'm like, well, see if we can outsource it. You can purchase a village, honey. Stimulate this economy a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. But I also feel like the transparency of sharing that is helpful because when you're out
Yes.
here and you're making it seem like it's so simple, none of it is simple, but you're saying like, just do this or just do that. And you don't say, and I am able to do that because I have a
Right.
cleaning person who comes in weekly. We've identified someone to help us with laundry. I have an amazing support system. Let people know that it's normal to ask for help instead of making them think that it's typical to not feel overwhelmed. And even when you're outsourcing, also identify that like you still may find that it's not enough. And that's also okay. You just like you mentioned on social media, you'll have people who will just act like it's that simple. And it's not. It's never going to be that simple. Children, they need so much. You are the only person that they've known their entire life. You are their
Mhm.
anchor, right? Like
Mhm.
my children literally look for me in every single space. That's a
Mhm.
huge responsibility to always have someone needing you. And it's also exhausting. You can be touched out because they're physically touching you. You also can be emotionally touched out at the aspect of having to be responsible. My husband mentioned he told my mom, like, I pulled up in the garage and my mom was in town. And she was like, oh, is Raquel here? I thought I heard the garage. And he said, yeah, sometimes she'll just sit in her car for like 15 minutes. And I told your husband, can you blame her? As soon as she comes in there, all of y'all are at her. Even the dog is right there. She
Oh, the
just
dog.
said, yeah, of course. And he was just like, I wasn't, he didn't really think about it that way. And he was like, well, yeah, the kids will come up and they'll run up to him and say hi. But then they're like, back to mommy. We just wanted to tell you, hey, but like, we're going back to mommy.
But you also got to get your head in the game, right? Like you got to
Yeah.
sort of shave off the day and then get your head in the game, because you are parenting in a totally different way than you were parented. So the
Yeah.
programming is totally different. My knee-jerk reaction, I was just saying before we like started the conversation in earnest, was like, I get offended when my kids don't want me. And like that's not
And I
that's
said, I
not
love it.
what we're
I
doing
love
here.
it so
Yeah,
much.
and that's not what we're doing here. I have to take a minute. I have to like really think about it. That doesn't make any sense. I actually don't really want them all over me all the time.
Yeah.
So I think like when you're breaking generational patterns,
Mhm.
like you need 15 minutes to yourself. Of course you do, because your knee jerk is going to be what we've already done, what we've already known,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I know that you also deeply respect children.
I
That
do.
takes a lot of work.
It does. And people don't get that. Sometimes people are like, someone I mentioned this post about how, I always ask my children if I can give them a hug or give them a kiss. For my oldest, it used to be yes all the time. Now, not so much. Like he sometimes will give me a hug. It'll be like 1 out of 10 times he'll let me give him a kiss. And I ask first. And I made a video like it is hard respecting consent because I want cuddles when I want them and he tells me no. And I was like, I don't, don't play up the manipulation. I don't cry in front of him. I go and cry in the corner like an adult because that's what
That's
you do. Because
that's what you do.
you don't want them to think that like as long as someone turns up the dial, you have to sacrifice your needs for their own. Like I'm not going to say it doesn't hurt. It sucks. Like
Mm.
sometimes I literally think all day, I just want a hug from this boy. But I
I'm not
also
gonna
don't want
cry.
him to get used to thinking like, okay, well, as long as they provide more justification, I need to sublimate my needs over theirs.
That's
And
right.
someone commented like, forget that. I'm an old school parent. I'm going to do what I do. And I did a post and I was like, don't say old school when you mean disrespectful, right? Because my mom was old school and she respected my wishes as well. It's not old school. It's like not respecting your child. That's not synonymous. There are many people who are old school parents and they're like, oh, I'm old school. I listen when my child says no. Like some people are saying old school, but they're meaning like disrespectful,
Mm.
and disparaging and invalidating. And to be honest, it is easier. It's easier to parent out of fear than out of respect.
Yeah.
It's easier to do that. It takes more time to take a breath and respect your child's wishes and realize that you're going to have to play the long game so that they can understand it. I want my child to be so steeped in respect that when someone disrespects them, it's so immediate that they're like, what the heck is this? I'm telling my mom right now. I'm
Yes.
telling my dad right now, because there is no way that was appropriate. They have never treated me like that. I want them
Oh.
to be so steeped in understanding and respect and people validating their feelings and consent that when it doesn't happen, a flash automatically goes off. Like I want them to just know that because they're not going to be around us all the time. They need to know that in their home base, anything that go against the values that we have set, that's a problem. And I need to tell someone, I need to let my family know, or I need to exit. Like that's what you're doing. You're coming up with this platform of this secure base that they understand that like, what do you mean you don't care about my feelings? That's a weird statement. I need to go find my parents. You're nuts.
Right.
Like that's what you
That is
want.
nuts. No, that's nuts. That's totally nuts. Like when we are in relationship with people who disrespect us, the idea of trying to make it work, that's when we're like, oh, they're nuts and now I'm nuts too. The real thing is I got to turn around and tell my safe space like, hey, I don't think that person is kind. I don't think they're respectful. I don't like them, in fact. I don't need their validation. I don't like that. That's what I hope for my children also.
Yeah, I want them to be like, what do you mean you're not going to listen to what they say? That's weird. Not a fan. I don't need that because they're so used to people respecting them. And the thing is, I think a lot of people think your children will walk all over you. No, but if my child can't critically think with me, because as someone who like is a licensed clinical psychologist, hundreds of patients from assessment, all the way to like IEP plans to therapy. One of the things that people don't understand is you can have this like crystallized intelligence. Anyone can memorize stuff. Anyone can memorize facts. But what adults need is the ability to critically think. And critically thinking means if I talk to you about consent and we discuss it, you don't only understand consent in this one narrative. You're able to apply it to other strategies, right? That's what they need. And the only way to do that is to have conversations and to allow them to ask questions. Does that mean they're going to walk all over you? No. But my child does go toe to toe with me every day. And if they're not comfortable asking me questions when they feel uncomfortable, how am I going to feel safe letting them out into the world? Like I genuinely would not feel safe letting my child in the world if I made them think that secrets were okay. People can talk over you. As long as they're an adult, and even if it makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in your body, they're allowed to do it. That's what makes for overprotective parents. If you're not really understanding the values that you're having in your child, if you're not allowing them to question, if you don't know them well enough to know that if they're uncomfortable, they're going to ask for help or ask for a question or look for an adult, of course you're going to be overprotective. You're not setting them up for success, like you mentioned. Like I would never be able to let my child out of my sight if I didn't really lead with respect, because obedience builds resentment. Respect builds relationships, and obedience is parenting out of fear. And it is easier. It's easier to make kids fear you. But is that what you want? You want them to just blindly follow an adult due to hierarchy? Do you know how dangerous that is?
We know where that leads.
It's very bad.
It's very bad. I mean, if we're going to be explicit, it leads to their sexual abuse. I mean, I think it
does. I worked at many sexual assault centers. I specialize in sexual trauma and assault, family and traumatic stress. And it's not even solely sexual assault. It's emotional abuse. It's physical abuse. And I haven't met an adult that I was working through emotional difficulties, acknowledging their feelings, even feeling safe in their body, that didn't have some semblance of obedience built into them as a child, that didn't have some aspect of verbal or emotional abuse or even physical as a child, right? Like it's hard for you to find your voice when you're constantly told it doesn't matter. And they deal with this as adults. I don't think I've ever had a patient who, as an adult, has difficulty building relationships with others, acknowledging that they need a relationship with themselves, and their childhood was totally respectful. Everyone was there for them. Everyone listened to them. They were allowed. I have not seen that. There's always some aspect of, oh yeah, I have difficulty knowing what I'm feeling because I was always told my feelings don't matter, or I was too young, or I shouldn't be, asking questions because I'm a child, or you pay attention and you respect adults even when they don't respect you. Like, childhood is the only time where people are literally able to assault you and, physically hit you. And you're just like, well, I mean, you're a child and it's not developed. It's not appropriate for you to know how to do better. So I'm going to hit you instead of talking to you about it. Childhood's the only time. Because if you hit an adult, you're getting charges pressed. It's just it's very odd.
It's so odd. It's so odd. Well, it's also in secrecy. Like, if a child is being hit, and we know about it, then charges will be pressed. But it's all happening. No one knows what happens behind closed doors, right?
No.
So we have to be in integrity in and of ourselves to know that, like, we are respecting our children, their body autonomy, their feelings, all of that, because literally this is all behind closed doors, a sort of enclave into itself. People can hit children. I mean, it's so crazy. It's just so crazy.
And you know what social media has shown?
They're old school. They call it old school.
Oh! Yeah. People mention the fact that, like, I feel like a lot of times people record stuff that they're okay with or that they're proud of. But one thing that I'm seeing more of is, like, people will mention, like, stuff behind closed doors, but they're filming it. And it's because they're comfortable with it. And then they'll be like, well, I didn't record this to hear everybody's comments. And it's like, you recorded this because you were clearly proud of this. And what you're doing is abusing your child. So if you're okay with recording it and letting the world see it, that lets me know how normalized this behavior is in your life, in your child's life. If you have no problem screaming at them and validating them, disparaging them, and you're like, oh, let me pull out the camera. This is some of my best work. I can't imagine what you do off of the camera. Like, the amount of times that people don't think that talking negatively to your children is inappropriate. And I'm not saying it's going to be sunshine and rainbows every single second, but parenting teaches me more about me than it will ever teach me about my child. It is exhausting. I need to know how I am right before I get touched out so I have someone to tap out, or I'm going to raise my voice. I'm going to be irritable, and I'm not going to be the person that they deserve. And that's why you need breaks. My children cannot get the mother that they deserve. My husband can't get the wife that he deserves. I don't get the person that I deserve if I'm around my kids all the time. Because I always tell them, I really want to miss you today. Allow me the pleasure of missing you. So you have to go to school, but there's no way for them to get the person that they deserve, the person that is able to regulate themselves so that you can co-regulate them, because they don't have the emotional regulation skills. You're regulating yourself, and then you're going to co-regulate them. You're gifting that to them. That's how it's supposed to be. But if you're around them all the time, that's not going to happen. And I think so many times parents think the only way for me to be a good parent is to be around my child 24/7. And I'm always like, what if I told you that is actually the exact opposite? The only way for you to be a good parent is to get some time away so that you can have silence and enjoy yourself. And there's nothing wrong with if you want to be around your children 24/7. But my question is, do you actually want to be around your children 24/7? Or do you feel like a bad person if you're not? So you just automatically, like, line up for every single thing? Do you genuinely not want any interest? You genuinely don't want time to just read or even just eat food hot? That's genuinely what you think is appropriate? I don't think that's true. I think most of the time people feel as though that's the only option. And they're going to burn out, or they're scared, right? So even
like, they have the information. That's right. Well, to be a bad mom, but also they have the information that we were sort of bouncing back and forth earlier, which is like, the world isn't always a safe place. People aren't always kind, so they're afraid, so they overparent, right? And that's an understandable response, but we can't parent from fear.
Yeah. And you parent out of a bunch of different fears. I deal with a lot of parents who parent out of racism-related fear, gender-related fear. Whenever you see those videos and they're like, guys are like, they don't want daughters. And I'm like, why is that? Is it because you also realize that being a woman in this world is awful? You ever think, like, whenever you see those and they're like, oh, it's a girl. Why? Is there something wrong with being a girl in this world? Is it tough?
I wonder.
Like, every single time I'm like, yeah. Do you ever think about why you have an instant fear of having a girl? Is it
Right?
because he
Because of the way
graduated college?
they treated women,
Yeah,
maybe,
it's
and that
like,
they have to like sort of deal with that. Maybe that's it. So
yeah, every single time I'm like, huh, it's almost like being a woman in this world is tougher than they say.
hmm,
Who
I
would think?
wonder. How do you find parenting two boys, actually? Is it an experience in and of itself, or do you not gender them that way?
Well, I don't have any other experience.
Right.
I will tell you, even my mom says like they're super rough.
Hmm.
My husband and my both of them, my husband and my oldest wrestle, which is typical. I actually used to love wrestling when it was good,
I,
but
I wrestle with my son. He likes
see,
it,
so it's
and
typical.
I'm more physical than my husband is, but
He's very,
that's
so I'll
fine.
be holding my son before he could walk and stuff like that, and he'll just be looking at them play fighting, and he is just ready to go. Like
Yeah.
he like I can literally see him being like, "Oh my gosh, I just can't wait." Whereas
Yeah.
I'm just like, "No, I'm not." Now I will read whatever book you want. We will have all the books and arts and crafts, but I'm not here for it. I don't like it. And it's crazy because I used to play rough with my husband all the time. But now I'm just like to the point where his parents were like, "You guys play too much." And I'll be like, "It's fun. That was youth." Now I'm like, listen, listen, listen. If I don't finish this page, I'm gonna lose it. All I want to
Mhm.
do is read this page. You and
Yeah.
I'm always like, go power bomb dad, because their whole thing is power bombing each other. It was like power bomb dad in the living room. Mama is in the front room. Just let me read this book. Power bomb dad in the living room. Or even just having to come up with strategies of just being like, he's like, oh, mama, this is like 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm gonna power bomb you. And I'm like, nope. Mama doesn't like being power bombed. And he's like,
Right.
okay, I'm
And you're
gonna
teaching
power
him
bomb
consent.
Jaden.
So you
Yeah,
see, you're teaching him consent. You're teaching
I
him
am,
like,
because it's
okay,
like I don't
I
like
have
it.
I have body autonomy. Autonomy. Mommy has body autonomy. Like we can still love each other, and it could still be no.
And it's a no, right? But he
It's a
goes
no.
down the list. I'm going to powerbomb Jaden. Nope. Well, Jaden's too small to be slammed on his head. Okay.
Uh,
I'm going to powerbomb Maddox, who is our dog. Nope. Well, Maddox doesn't like it either. And he's like, I'm going to powerbomb Dad. Yes. Because Dad's
yeah.
okay with it. Like, even just being like, no, or even telling my son, like, he's my youngest is actually only really affectionate with me. Everyone
Hmm.
else, he's like, listen, unless you birth me, do not try to cuddle with me. I will go off. But my oldest is very cuddly. So before my youngest was saying no, you could tell he was saying no, though. He would push and he was saying, So I told my son, I was like, we have to respect his no. And no isn't always going to be the word no, right? Because he wasn't saying no yet.
Right.
He would just like push, or you could see his face. So I would try to bring attention to his cues. I would be like, you see his face is scrunched up? That means he doesn't like it. Or do you see he's moving away? That means he doesn't like it. So I always say we respect each other's no, but we have to respect what our words are saying and what our body is saying. Because for the longest, he wasn't saying no.
Yeah.
And he would just be like, well, he's not saying no, mama. And I'm like, that is a very good point. He doesn't know how to say it yet. So now we just, I'm just like, his face is scrunched up. He's moving away. When he got a little bit bigger, he'll just slap the crap out of my oldest. And he'll just be like, I said no. Like,
It's an opportunity actually with babies and animals to like really teach nonverbal
nonverbal
communication.
cues. Yeah.
Yeah, because actually, don't they say that like it's 90% of the way we are interacting is non-verbally?
It's a good chunk because like
It's
most
a
of the
good
time,
chunk, maybe not 90, but
it's
either
definitely
way, like
over
we're
50.
picking up on
There's no
cues. Like
way.
even in this interaction, like we have our hands, we have our faces, like we're picking up
Yeah.
on like where the vibe is going. I feel like with babies and with animals, we have that opportunity to teach our kids. Like actually, it's not even about. Let's say I don't know. I'm in France.
And I don't know
Like
the language.
I
Yeah.
don't know the language, so I can still communicate with other sentient beings and know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
Because if children will do anything, it's find a loophole. Because the first thing he said
Mhm.
was, he didn't say no, mama. And
That's
I'm
right.
like, oh, you're right.
He's
You're
smart.
right.
He's smart. He's your
You're
son.
right. He did not say no. I need to come at this a different way.
He's got
He
he's got those. You did teach him those critical thinking skills, by the
I did.
way. You
He
did
was
it.
just like, he didn't say no, mama. And I'm like, okay. So we talk about that. And since they are super rough, and a lot of times he does want me a lot of the time, even just normalizing that I'm not always going to want to hug you. He says he needs space when he needs it because I say I need space when I need it. Because I don't like the aspect of having to sacrifice. Not every time. Like sometimes I'll give him a hug when he wants it and I don't want one, but that's still my choice. The automatic assumption that I'm going to give you a hug even when I don't want one is just like inappropriate because children are they're going to take what you have to offer. They're designed to take. That's how they stay alive. But it's up to me to decide how much I put on the plate, right? Like I'm
I
not
need you to repeat that.
all
I
this
need
stuff.
you to no, I need you to repeat it. I need you to repeat it. For me, this is for me. I just want you to know, everyone to know this is
Children are designed to take. It's developmentally appropriate. That's how they survive. It's up to me to decide how much I put on the plate or what I put on the plate, right? Like I can't offer them like steak and eggs and they be mad when they take my steak and eggs. I can offer you like, here's a piece of an egg and half a hash brown. My steak is in the corner. This is what you have this is what you have. These are your options. But for the longest, especially I have to say like the beginning of the year, I kept like pushing my boundaries back and then getting upset when they like walked past the boundary that wasn't even there. And then I just had to remind myself like, well, of course they're going to want you all the time. And of course they're going to ask for everything. Why do you keep offering it? It was a me thing because I see all these articles about what to do when someone violates your boundaries. And that's not true because no one can violate your boundaries other than you, right? Like a boundary guides your behavior. A rule will guide someone else's behavior because someone can violate a rule and your boundary still holds firm. Right? So like the only thing you can control is your behavior. That's why boundaries only guide your behavior. So when someone leads you into an encounter where you violate your own boundaries for them, you have to ask yourself what led to that, right? Like I mentioned the fact that I'm sleepy, but my son asked me to read the 50th book of the night. And instead of me saying no and going to sleep, I read another book, right? So my boundary of being like, you get 2 books, like I'm not going to engage when I'm exhausted or something like that. I violated that boundary. What do I do to figure out how to fix it next time? I have to ask myself questions. What got in the way of me holding this boundary? Was it my relationship with them? Yes. I love my children. I would give them everything, right? Was it the fact that I just didn't feel like going back and forth? Yes, because sometimes maintaining your boundaries takes more time than giving in. A lot of times it does. The exhaustion, was I tired?
The feeling scattered. By the way, the first thing you said was I feel scattered, but the truth is you feel scattered for good reason. We're in the midst of something pretty deep here, building an empire of like values and education and also like rearing 2 little boys. It's
typical, right?
It's scattering. And still you showed up, by the way. Just FYI, just wanted to say that, by the way. Still you showed up 3 minutes early.
Oh yeah, but also
cute
that's the thing.
And ready to play.
It's saying that and just knowing that like that's what keeps you going, right? Because like I feel scattered and I also like love what I do, and I don't want, like I tell my son he can do hard things, right? Because there's a lot of things that he's like, oh, this is tough, and I was like, oh, I know it's tough, and it's a good thing you can do hard things. I don't want you to think that because something is difficult that means it's not for you, right? Like there's so many corny things that I say, even when I say them, I'm like, that was so whack. Like, for example, he'll lose a game because listen, here's the thing, sometimes you win, sometimes you'll lose, but he'll get upset. He used to get upset. And now he'll be like, oh, mama, I lost. And I'm like, that's okay. You can't always win, but you can always have fun. So corny. Like even when I said it, me and my husband looked at each other and he was like, whack, but good. Like, it was
whack?
So corny.
Is it a t-shirt? It's a t-shirt.
It might as well be, right? You can't always win, but you can always have fun. I don't want him to think that in order to enjoy something, you have to get straight A's. Or I'm a praise the effort kind of person, right? Like my mom always reared me like, I want you to put your best foot forward. If your best foot was a C, okay. But I need you to be honest about whether it was. If it was, it was. If it wasn't, it wasn't. I don't want him to feel as though, you only have to either have like a solid, huge, amazing product or only be like only provide positives based off of the end goal. You may not always get an A and you're not going to be good at everything. That's just absurd. But I can praise the fact that like, oh, look, your handwriting, I see how much better you got on that C. I know that you didn't get the A that you wanted, but look at how much your skills have improved. I saw you studying so much harder. No, you didn't make that goal, but you ran really, really quick and you almost made it. Like, I don't want you to think that you're only praising the end goal because it really doesn't give honor to the work and effort that's put out there. And bottom line, the thought process that you're going to be good at everything is absurd.
Oh
There
my
are
God,
going
it's
to be
so
people out
painful.
there that are better than you. Does that mean that you don't get to do it? Does that mean
No,
that you don't get to enjoy it? I don't want you
no.
to think that the only way you're going to enjoy something is if you're 100% amazing at it. There are plenty of things that I love doing, and there are people out there better at it than me, but it's not going to stop me from enjoying it. And I think that's what happens all the time. Like, it's like, mama isn't good at everything, but I like it. You don't have
Yeah,
to be the
but you
best.
know what? You're the best. You're the best at being you. Like you are living in your truth. You are living in your purpose. I could cry just thinking about it. Like just I think about your website and your like deep passion to empower your community with
Mhm.
mental wellness. I mean, it is beautiful. You know yourself. That's the best we can do. You know yourself and you're
Right?
amazing at being yourself. I
And
really
the
just
only
want to
way you
I
can
need to
do that
reflect that
is
to
if
you.
you, yeah, I appreciate that. I was gonna say the only way you can do that is to walk away sometimes, right? Because a lot of
Mm.
times people will think the best way to parent is to like, I know everything about your kids, but like even when, and a lot of times parents don't get this, even when you're not like overtly teaching your children, they watch you all the time, right? They watch how you handle your frustrations and your missteps and your happiness. They watch like what you center in your life. And for them to
Mhm.
be able to watch mama and be like, oh, it's a girls' weekend. I love y'all. I'm out. Like
And like
mama's
with cute
going on a date with
fashion,
dad. Yes.
your
Like I
your
like dressing
glasses
up
every day,
too.
like they know that like you are expressing yourself. Like what are the glasses going to be today? I don't know. Can you imagine being your kid? The rest of us
Yeah.
like on on our phones are like, I mean, what color? Like
I
what
love I
shape?
love them. I tell you what though, my sons do not like lipstick.
Oh,
So
isn't
I
it cute when they have an opinion?
he does
The best.
because anytime I wear lipstick, because I was in school forever, so I never really got to like do the fun stuff. And I'm like, dress up is fun. Like I've always had fun with earrings, and glasses and hair. But I was like, oh my God, these makeup tutorials are amazing. So like
Ah,
starting in my 30s, I was like, I'm gonna learn how to do like a firm lip. So I'll play around with them. And anytime the youngest will look like, how are
who
you
is
going to
that?
give me cuddles with those lips? But the oldest will also be like, why do you have lipstick on? And I'll be like, Mama likes lipstick. Do you like it? I don't. I
Mm,
don't like it. And I was like, well,
mm.
I like it and everything. I would typically say, I like it and everything's not for you. You need help off the car seat?
We need t-shirts. Dr. Martin, we need t-shirts. I like it and everything's not for you and you don't always have to win, but you can always have fun.
You can
We
always have fun.
okay, listen, I can't log off this call
Mhm.
without asking. You provide such beautiful information around raising Black children specifically. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering, how do we fortify their mental wellness? How do we remind them how very special and important they are? And I know that you go into this on your YouTube page, but if we can give our listeners a taste so they know to please follow Dr. Martin on all the socials and on YouTube and, you know, get your asses there to learn. But can you give
Yeah.
us a taste of this education? Because I think you do such a beautiful job at it.
Oh yeah, of course. Um, I typically tell parents to focus on centering the humanity of Black youth because it's dehumanization, deriving children of human qualities and freedoms and adultifying them and not seeing them as children. That's what Black children walk through the world with every single day. And I think there's typically a mindset with Black youth, and I think it's decreasing a lot, that the world is tough, so I'm going to be tougher because you can't be around your children all the time and you're parenting out of racism related fear, which very much is a generational thing, right?
Mhm.
But I've always lived according to the aspect of like the world is tough, so I am always going to be a soft space for my children to land. I
Mhm.
will never treat my children or my husband or any of my family people in my community the way that the world treats us because the world treats us terribly.
Mm.
So I've always made it a point to foster their freedoms when it comes to speaking what they want to say and allowing them to speak. Does it slow us down? All day. My God.
All day,
But their
every day.
agenda is never going to be the same as ours, right? Like that's the thing that's very frustrating for parents. The child agenda is always going to be fun. Our agenda is going to be keeping them alive. They don't always link up. Most of the time they don't, right?
No,
So like
and
it is more difficult to try to make sure that we incorporate fun or I'll allow them to have some freedoms. A lot of times it would be great. We could wake up an hour later in the day if my son didn't dawdle. Is that going to happen? No. But instead of rushing him, I realized that like, okay, well, enjoy yourself. You got to get up an hour early. What if I told you you could get up at 7, but you act the way you act? So you getting up at
mm,
6. Like, so I try to be more flexible. I really, really try to foster making sure that they're centered in the majority of spaces and that they understand that they can be in every single realm, from the artwork to the books. I had to drop off like a bunch of books at my oldest
Okay.
school. His pre-K. And it's typical. We live in Nashville, so it's typical to have like, there's not many spaces where it looks like my son. But the thing is, teachers have so much work to do, and they already have to come so much out of pocket with their stuff. I would love it if I didn't have to buy the books, but I'm not going to expect them to buy the books because half of that stuff I know for a fact they bought themselves, right?
Wow.
So I make sure that if he's not seeing himself in his classroom, I donate books. I make sure that I provide artwork around, and I also make it a point to educate myself about the things that contribute to this, because a lot of times people, especially in the Black community, will think like this is just the way it is. However, we're in a community that never expected us to survive, let alone thrive. Things are changing, but you need to educate yourself on the fact that like, this is not healthy. It was never meant to be healthy. So it's okay to state that like, my parents did their best and it wasn't enough. It's okay to state that I used to use corporal punishment. I don't want to use it anymore. It's okay to state that in your own parenting, you're going to grow. And with Black parents, the majority of the time, or parents of Black children, because parents of Black children are not always Black. So when you're a parent,
I know a few of the listeners who are listening right now. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. So I always say parenting of Black children. Yeah, because just because you have a Black child does not mean that you're Black. Like that's just what it is. Stating that you also have to center the humanity in yourself, because there's no way to have humanity for someone else when you never got granted that. There's no way. A lot of parents will feel like very triggered with their child crying because they were never allowed to cry. It's not even the fact that it's annoying, but it is annoying. My God. But it's also the fact that like, I was never able to cry. Or when they ask you questions, I was seen and not heard. Or when they want some extracurricular activities, or they don't want their food and their snacks and stuff like that. And you're like, well, you're getting mad at a child for being hungry because you were told eat or go to bed hungry, right? Like some of the stuff that you're upset at when it comes to your child are things that like were never able to happen with you. So it's kind of like, you're like, the audacity. How dare you ask me a question that's a valid question so that I can explain myself? I was never able to do that. So I always tell parents of Black children, like, to center the humanity of your children, to let them know that they're allowed to have freedoms too, because it's very stressful to realize early on that there are certain people who are allowed to like run around and you're not. And you don't think it's because of racism. You think it's because of race, right? So I always state, let your children know racism is the problem, not race. Everyone is not racist.
Racism is a problem, not race.
Yeah, because sometimes I feel like when I'm working with younger children, and honestly, I feel like in teens it comes to a head, but I would deal with these young men and young women, and they had this like smoldering anger of thinking that things weren't fair, and they always assume that it was because they're Black, but it's not because you're Black. It's because of the racism that's placed on Black people. It's not because of you and how you were born. It's because of systemic aspects of oppression and racism and prejudice and bias and the way that's imparted on you, right? And to separate those two lets you know that it's a system issue. And it's not a you issue. It's not because you were born Black. It's because for some people, being born Black means something to them that is not what it means. So it takes away the aspect of, oh, this is a me thing versus this is a world thing. And I still need to walk in the way I want to. I'm still allowed to have my freedoms. I just also need to be aware that some people will respond different ways and plan accordingly. But a lot of people, some youth, they think it's because I'm Black. Nope. That's not it. It's because of racism. That's not because you're Black. That's a other person thing. So I try to tell people to focus on that. Be aware of that, educate yourself, and listen to your children, because I was listening to the podcast with Nina Westbrook, and it's I think it's called The Relationship. It's called The Relationship Chronicles, and her husband Russell Westbrook mentioned that it is like the most awesome roller coaster being a parent. Yeah. And she was like, and she's a therapist too, and she was like, that's a really good way to describe it. When people ask me about parenting, I typically say, oh, it's amazingly awful. Like it's amazing and it's awful. Like the other night, my youngest had dairy, and then my other one, like, so like at the end of the night, the things that I saw before I went to bed, and it's nose running season, and I'm like, it's just butts and noses, and I'm supposed to eat. It's butts and noses.
It's just
It's
gross. Actually,
amazing.
on like a bodily level, by the way, I felt this way the second I got pregnant. Like on a bodily level, this whole thing is gross. Like this is just like
It's the gross.
what
Is it not? Daniela,
on
is
the
it
on,
not? It's the grossest thing in life. Parenting is
so
disgusting.
on like a bodily level, like we're just
Yeah.
talking blood, we're shit, piss,
It's
boogers,
not.
oh god,
So
all
many
the feel
boogers.
screaming, the screaming also is just the mess. It is on a physical level gross, and on a spiritual, emotional, purpose-driven level, it's a high. It really is. From the
Yeah.
second I was pregnant, I felt that way. Like this is physically disgusting. Like I'm I'm taken over by a parasite that's gonna be a
Listen,
person one day. I mean, this is like ET stuff. It's so weird. They come out, by the way, and I'm like, oh my god, this is the most beautiful baby. Meanwhile, they're like reptiles,
my
like
husband always says that. He's just like, oh, when do they start? He said, I have to remember, when do they start looking normal again? And I'm like, don't you talk about my baby like that.
exactly. My babies are gorgeous the second
That
they
is
come
my
out,
baby. How
but then
dare
the
you?
second they're just like reptilian, like they're aliens. This
Barely
is
having their
worse.
eyes
I mean,
open. Just
there's a lot going on there, but like then on this it's not, no, there's no middle ground. There is
no.
no middle ground. It is both disgusting and like wildly fulfilling. I
Yeah.
mean, just like absolutely gorgeous all at once is how. And yeah, that's I'm with you on this.
It
And
is
that
really.
happened all last night.
Yeah,
Started
I typically, and I'll just be like, and I'm supposed to sleep and not have nightmares after what I've seen. It's really like that because everybody has their thing. I can deal with a bunch of bodily fluids, but snot has always grossed me out.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so sorry. This is terrible. This is gonna be. You live in Nashville. That's okay.
I
Don't
do, and
don't
it's
move
one
to
of
New
the
York.
worst allergy places in the world.
Yeah.
Like,
Martin.
and it's even a thing with my mom because my mom's thing, her thing is snot. And if you sniffed around her, it was just like she'll either look at you or she'll just say, "Go up and blow your nose." So like the fact that my son will just like, and I'm just like, it's just so nasty. It's amazing. And I will also state, however, I will also say, like, to all the parents out there, it is okay if one of those moments outweighs the other. If you're in a realm of like the awful outweighing the amazing, there is nothing wrong with you. Being a parent is one of the most difficult jobs that will ever be out there. And stating that like everything is awesome when it's not is the surest way to not get the resources you need, because sometimes people think that we're okay and we're not. And one thing about me and my platform, I'll straight be like, I'm down bad. It's rough.
Well,
This
your
is totally
answer to today.
yeah.
I'm like, who are you today? You're like, I am a scattered person
Didn't even
who showed up
just saw
who showed up
female
3 minutes
disappear.
early to play.
Yeah,
The
but
email
literally,
disappeared, but like I'm still here. I'm having a
I
good
walked
time.
so
I'm
long
wearing my
last
cute
week,
glasses and my
wearing my
earrings,
glasses and
signature.
my earrings.
But I'm
I
scattered. I mean, you're honest. You're honest. I think that's
gotta
like
be. I very much think like I heal in like some people come to me for mental health, some people come for me Black identity stuff. But a lot of times I'm like, I heal in public to help those heal in private. I very much do not care because here's the thing. Uh my mom instilled an aspect of emboldening and empowerment in me. So I'm just like, I mean, if you don't like it, okay. Like I don't care. Like what you want me to do with that, honey? That's not gonna change my day. I still said it. You're talking to someone who millions of degrees legit sprained my pinky toe because I walked into a wall while being distracted. 4 toes went one way, 1 toe went the other. And legit was just like, and my husband was like, oh, we got to figure, you can't really do anything for a sprained toe. My biggest thing was like, oh, I have an event and I have to have my feet out and I can't get a pedicure. And I don't have a pedicure. I plan on wearing closed toe shoes. And he's like, I feel like there are other priorities, like the fact that your toe is sprained. And I said, I feel like the main priority is that now I have to have my feet out and my feet are not done. Focus. I'm like, focus. Okay.
My priority is mine, babe. Mine.
Yes. I said, listen, sir, you're being insane. This is aesthetically unpleasing. We can't do this.
I mean, broken toes really are aesthetically unpleasing. I just want to say my son has like some toe infection right now, and
right.
but we're gonna get through it, and it's gonna be great.
It's gonna be great.
I can't believe an hour has gone by.
This is great. This is fun.
I mean, it's a great start to my day. I don't know what month it is for you, friend, who's listening, but right now it's September. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be following Dr. Martin on TikTok and Instagram. Can you tell us more about where we can follow you, what your handle is, what's up next, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. So my handle is Raquel Martin PhD everywhere. I am on TikTok and Instagram. I'm trying to do more longer form content on YouTube, but YouTube is tough. Like anytime I do a short video, people are like, "We need more nuance," and then I do YouTube, and they're like, "Just kidding. We're not going to go there because we don't like
But
YouTube."
no, I actually loved your YouTube, and when you talked about
Identity development.
ethnic identity development,
Mhm.
I really related to it. I learned a lot from it, and also I learned a lot about like the Black community
Mhm.
in that I guess it was 15 minutes, and I learned a lot about your perspective. I just want to advocate for your long form content, even
Because
if
it's
there are
never
like
enough time.
I know, even if there are 100 views. Just by the way, like I'm one of those 100. The person listening
Thank
to
you.
this, like we really care. And so the millions of people who want to hear the 1 minute, bless them, bless them. They probably
Yeah.
have other things going on, but like whatever. Maybe you have other things to do, but your longer form content is powerful. And that one video, I wish I remembered the name. Well, just go to the YouTube, guys.
That's the goal.
Um,
I literally only got on social media because my patients, I would be like, hey, your homework between session, like follow, not follow people, but get some additional resources. And they're like, there's no one who breaks stuff down the same. That's why I keep not doing my homework. And I'm like, okay, fine. Okay.
mm,
Well, I'm just going to
mm,
record these little videos. And then I was like, oh, people actually watch these things.
yeah, yeah, they
Like,
do.
so I would say that I'm bringing back my podcast. I do Mind Your Mental podcast. I took a huge hiatus. On the second season, you can actually hear my youngest in the background. And then I was like, oh, I really miss doing the podcast thing. So that'll be back in mid-October. But the first two seasons are out there. First season is all about people sharing their aspects of mental health. I have interviews every single week. And the second season is more shorter, where I'm providing like some additional information and like content and like typical Dr. Martin transparency. One of my episodes is called Shift Happens, and I'm talking about moving to Nashville and how I'm about to rip my hair out. And I'm like, this
Mm.
is so hard, y'all. I can't find a house. If I have to go look at another open house, I am gonna lose it. This is
Love it.
ridiculous. It's awful.
Love it.
But I would say, yeah, that's it. More so just leaning into that. I'm hoping to try to do some more workshops and stuff like that. But honestly, the only thing I'm thinking of right now, truly, is getting an 8-foot skeleton for my front yard
For
for
Halloween.
Halloween because I bought one and apparently it's indoor and
Mm, mm.
my oldest is devastated.
Right.
So that's
Priorities.
the only thing in my mind. Like, how the flip am I going to get this 8-foot thing by Friday so that he can have the scary skeleton? The thing is super creepy, but he was just like, I want that one.
Dr. Martin, I really love that we can go so macro and so very micro, um, all at once.
You gotta
Um,
be able to transition.
I
We
mean,
gotta talk
really,
about policy and snotty noses. I mean, what
we,
else is
we,
there in life?
this is motherhood. This is it. This is it. Okay, friends, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. You can follow me at Daniela Rabbani on Instagram. That's really where I hang out most. But wasn't this good? Tell me more about it. Leave a review. Share with others, please, please, please. Okay, be well. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, as always, for listening to the Mom Curious podcast. My name is Daniela Rabbani. I am your host, and I would love to continue this conversation at Daniela Rabbani on Instagram. And if you'd be so kind to rate and review, share this podcast, I would be just really grateful. Catch you next time, every Tuesday on the Mom Curious podcast, produced by Hoff Studios. You can find them at Hoff Studios on Instagram as well. All right, have a great day.